The European Union has taken an unprecedented and dramatic step in international trade relations by ceasing all pharmaceutical exports to the United States.
The European Union says it is retaliating with tariffs on 26 billion euros worth of US goods.
This decision emerged in the wake of a controversial announcement by the newly elected US president, whose tariff impositions on pharmaceutical products have unsettled long-established trade conventions between the two economic powerhouses. The move by the EU comes as a powerful signal of its discontent with what it perceives as a unilateral shift in trade policy, a shift that has ignited fierce debates about the balance between protectionism and free market principles. With decades of mutual reliance and regulatory cooperation behind them, both sides have enjoyed a historically stable and integrated relationship in the realm of pharmaceuticals. However, the imposition of tariffs by the US administration has cast a long shadow of uncertainty over this collaboration, prompting EU leaders to act decisively. Their decision to halt exports is not merely an economic measure, but a multifaceted strategic response, rooted in concerns about the long-term viability of cross-Atlantic trade under the new policy environment. It underscores a belief that the fundamentals of international commerce must be safeguarded against rapid shifts that could undermine not only market stability, but also the integrity of regulatory standards that have been cultivated over generations. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. The catalyst for this major policy reversal lies in the recent tariff announcement by the US administration, a measure that sought to protect domestic industries by placing hefty duties on imported pharmaceutical products. The new tariffs were framed as a necessary corrective to address trade imbalances and to reinvigorate domestic production, echoing a broader nationalistic sentiment that had resonated with a significant portion of the electorate. Critics argued that such tariffs would disrupt the delicate balance of global supply chains, particularly in an industry where innovation, rigorous safety standards, and extensive regulatory oversight have traditionally fostered robust partnerships across continents. In response, EU officials contended that these unilateral tariff policies were not only economically unsound, but also politically provocative, as they threatened to destabilize long-standing trade agreements and the intricate network of regulatory harmonization that underpins the pharmaceutical sector. The EU's decision to suspend all exports was crafted as both a defensive and a retaliatory maneuver, designed to protect its own industrial interests while sending a strong message about the importance of maintaining reciprocal, rules-based trade relations. This decisive action thus marks a turning point in transatlantic economic relations, encapsulating a moment when ideological differences and economic pragmatism collided in a high-stakes showdown. At the heart of the dispute is a clash of economic philosophies that goes far beyond the immediate figures and percentages associated with tariff rates. The US administration's tariff policy embodies a protectionist impulse, one that prioritizes short-term domestic gains over the nuanced benefits of global interdependence. In contrast, the European approach has long been characterized by a commitment to multilateralism, regulatory consistency, and the free flow of goods, a model that has, until now, enjoyed broad consensus among its member states. The shutdown of pharmaceutical exports is a manifestation of the growing divergence between these two worldviews. For the EU, the decision is as much about defending the economic interests of its pharmaceutical industry as it is about preserving a model of trade that has yielded stability, innovation, and consumer safety for decades. This divergence has now been thrown into sharp relief, with the EU's dramatic measure underscoring its determination to safeguard its standards and economic sovereignty. By curbing the flow of pharmaceuticals to a market that has suddenly adopted a more aggressive trade stance, European leaders are effectively drawing a line in the sand, a line that signals their willingness to endure short-term disruptions in order to maintain a long-term commitment to the principles of open yet fair global commerce. The immediate implications of the EU's decision are poised to reverberate across multiple layers of the global economy, particularly affecting the US pharmaceutical market. With the abrupt cessation of imports from one of its most important trade partners, the United States now faces the daunting challenge of securing alternative sources for critical medications. This disruption in supply is likely to unsettle the complex network of relationships that have long ensured the consistent availability of high-quality drugs, and it may force U.S. manufacturers to accelerate plans for increased domestic production, a process that, given the stringent regulatory requirements of the pharmaceutical industry, cannot be accomplished overnight. In the short term, hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies may encounter challenges in maintaining the steady supply of life-saving medications, a development that carries significant implications for public health and the stability of the healthcare system. At the same time, consumers may face uncertainty and anxiety as market dynamics shift, potentially leading to higher prices and reduced availability of certain pharmaceutical products. These economic ripples will not be contained within national borders alone. Rather, they are likely to extend to global markets, further complicating the intricate web of international supply chains that modern commerce depends upon. Economic considerations are deeply interwoven with the political and regulatory dimensions of this unfolding scenario. The EU's decision to halt pharmaceutical exports is a calculated response, reflective of a broader strategic posture that aims to reassert its influence over global trade governance. This move highlights the critical importance of maintaining balance in international trade, where unilateral actions, such as the imposition of tariffs, can provoke retaliatory measures that risk destabilizing long-established commercial relationships. By choosing to suspend exports, the EU has signaled its readiness to engage in a high-stakes game of economic brinkmanship, one that emphasizes the primacy of regulatory autonomy and the protection of domestic industrial interests. Economic models based on mutual dependency are now being re-evaluated as policymakers on both sides grapple with the challenges posed by an increasingly volatile and unpredictable global marketplace. In this context, the shutdown of pharmaceutical exports serves as a stark reminder that economic policy decisions cannot be divorced from their political consequences. They serve as powerful instruments of statecraft, capable of reshaping the landscape of international relations in ways that extend far beyond simple trade statistics. The ensuing tension may force both sides to re-examine the delicate equilibrium that has long underpinned their economic partnership. The geopolitical implications of this move are equally profound, as the shutdown of pharmaceutical exports has the potential to redefine the contours of transatlantic relations. In a world where power is increasingly measured not just in military might, but also in economic influence, the decision by the EU represents a bold assertion of its capacity to shape global trade policies on its own terms. The move challenges the long-standing notion of American hegemony in setting international economic agendas, suggesting that emerging multipolar realities are forcing a reconfiguration of power dynamics. European leaders have long prided themselves on their ability to craft policies that reflect both economic pragmatism and a commitment to collective values. By leveraging their economic might to counteract what they see as the unilateral impositions of the U.S. administration, they are not only protecting their own interests, but also sending a broader message about the need for fairness and reciprocity in international trade. This development is likely to be scrutinized by other global players, who may view the EU's actions as a precedent for how to respond to perceived overreach by dominant economies. The interplay between national sovereignty and global interdependence has reached a critical juncture, one in which every decision carries far-reaching implications for the future of international cooperation and conflict resolution. Within the pharmaceutical industry itself, the shutdown of exports is expected to trigger a profound period of strategic realignment. European pharmaceutical companies, many of which have built their reputations on a foundation of innovation and stringent regulatory oversight, now face the challenge of redirecting their focus toward alternative markets and new logistical strategies. The disruption in trade flows may compel these companies to accelerate plans for diversification and to explore partnerships with nations that share their commitment to high standards of quality and safety. Internally, firms will likely undertake comprehensive reviews of their supply chain vulnerabilities, investing in technologies and infrastructures that can buffer against future geopolitical shocks. This period of adjustment may also prompt a re-examination of research and development strategies as companies seek to mitigate the risks associated with over-reliance on any single market. The decision to halt exports is not merely a defensive maneuver. It is also a proactive step that underscores the importance of long-term resilience in an increasingly unpredictable global environment. In the midst of these challenges, there remains a palpable sense of determination among industry leaders to uphold the high standards that have long defined European pharmaceutical excellence, even as they navigate the uncertain terrain of a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape. The public health dimension of this decision cannot be overstated, as the availability of pharmaceutical products is inextricably linked to the well-being of entire populations. In the United States, where a substantial portion of essential medications has historically been imported from Europe, the abrupt shutdown of exports raises critical concerns about the future reliability of the healthcare system. Physicians and healthcare administrators are now forced to confront the prospect of supply shortages that could affect treatments for a wide range of conditions, from chronic illnesses to acute emergencies. The potential for increased costs and reduced access to medications is a stark reminder that economic policies have direct, tangible effects on everyday lives. For patients, particularly those with complex or life-threatening conditions, the uncertainty surrounding drug availability may exacerbate existing vulnerabilities and lead to heightened anxiety. The intersection of economic policy and public health is a delicate one, and the current situation underscores the need for a balanced approach that prioritizes both national economic interests and the health and security of citizens. As regulatory agencies and policymakers scramble to assess the full scope of these challenges, the broader implications for public trust in both governmental institutions and the pharmaceutical industry come into sharp focus. Debates about the merits and pitfalls of free trade versus protectionism have long animated discussions in both economic and political circles, and the current situation provides a vivid illustration of this ideological clash. On one side, proponents of unfettered trade argue that open markets and free exchange are the cornerstones of innovation, consumer choice, and global prosperity. On the other, advocates of protectionist measures contend that strategic interventions are necessary to shield domestic industries from the vagaries of international competition and to preserve national sovereignty in an increasingly uncertain global landscape. The shutdown of pharmaceutical exports by the EU can be seen as a dramatic manifestation of the latter perspective, a bold move aimed at reasserting control over a critical sector of the economy. This act challenges conventional wisdom and forces a re-examination of long-held assumptions about the benefits of global integration. It invites policymakers, business leaders, and citizens alike to reflect on the inherent tensions between the imperatives of economic efficiency and the demands of national self-determination. In doing so, it raises profound questions about the future trajectory of international trade, the role of government in managing economic affairs, and the values that underpin a truly equitable global marketplace. Legal and regulatory challenges are set to compound the complexity of this trade confrontation, as both sides now face a rapidly evolving landscape of policy disputes and potential litigation. On the other, advocates of protectionist measures contend that strategic interventions are necessary to shield domestic industries from the vagaries of international competition and to preserve national sovereignty in an increasingly uncertain global landscape. The shutdown of pharmaceutical exports by the EU can be seen as a dramatic manifestation of the latter perspective, a bold move aimed at reasserting control over a critical sector of the economy. This act challenges conventional wisdom and forces a re-examination of long-held assumptions about the benefits of global integration. It invites policymakers, business leaders, and citizens alike to reflect on the inherent tensions between the imperatives of economic efficiency and the demands of national self-determination. In doing so, it raises profound questions about the future trajectory of international trade, the role of government in managing economic affairs, and the values that underpin a truly equitable global marketplace. Legal and regulatory challenges are set to compound the complexity of this trade confrontation, as both sides now face a rapidly evolving landscape of policy disputes and potential litigation. The EU's decision to halt pharmaceutical exports is likely to trigger a series of legal debates centered on the interpretation of international trade agreements and the mechanisms for dispute resolution that have long governed cross-border commerce. Questions will inevitably arise about the legality of unilateral tariff measures and the appropriate responses under the framework of existing treaties and conventions. European legal experts are poised to argue that the shutdown is a legitimate exercise of sovereignty, a necessary measure to protect the integrity of its markets against what it views as an overreach by an external power. Conversely, American legal authorities may contend that such measures undermine the principles of reciprocity and fair competition that have long underpinned transatlantic trade. These legal wrangles are expected to add another layer of complexity to an already fraught situation, as international courts and regulatory bodies are called upon to interpret and enforce the nuanced provisions of global trade law. The outcome of these disputes will not only have immediate consequences for the pharmaceutical sector, but could also set important precedents for future conflicts in other critical industries. Diplomatic channels are now being tested as never before, with the shutdown of pharmaceutical exports serving as a potent symbol of the deep-seated tensions that have emerged between the European Union and the United States. The decision has already sent ripples through diplomatic circles, with officials from both sides urgently seeking to recalibrate their approaches in light of the rapidly shifting landscape. While the move is fundamentally an economic one, its broader implications extend into the realm of international relations, where trust and mutual understanding are the bedrocks of enduring alliances. The EU's actions have been interpreted by some as a clear indication that long-standing norms of cooperation and dialogue are being redefined by a new era of assertive national interests. In response, American diplomats are tasked with navigating an increasingly complex negotiation environment, one in which traditional channels of dialogue may prove inadequate in addressing the multifaceted challenges posed by such bold policy shifts. The current impasse serves as a reminder that in a world marked by rapid change and heightened uncertainty, even the most deeply rooted alliances can be vulnerable to abrupt and transformative decisions. The unfolding situation calls for a renewed commitment to diplomatic engagement, as both sides strive to find a path forward amidst the turbulence of competing national priorities. As this momentous decision reverberates across international markets, industry leaders and policymakers are left with the formidable task of recalibrating their strategies in a context where every move carries significant repercussions. The shutdown of pharmaceutical exports is not an isolated event, but rather a critical juncture that encapsulates the broader challenges of navigating a fragmented global economy. Companies that have long relied on the seamless integration of transatlantic supply chains now face the daunting prospect of re-engineering their operations to accommodate an era of heightened geopolitical risk and regulatory unpredictability. Investors, too, are compelled to re-examine their portfolios, as the specter of trade disruptions casts a long shadow over the future prospects of the pharmaceutical sector. This shift in market sentiment is likely to spur a wave of innovation as firms seek to develop more resilient business models that emphasize diversification, self-reliance, and strategic agility in the face of uncertainty. The current landscape demands not only a keen understanding of economic trends, but also a deep appreciation for the political and regulatory dynamics that shape the global marketplace. In this light, the shutdown of exports serves as both a warning and an opportunity, a signal that the rules of engagement in international trade are undergoing a profound transformation, and that those who wish to thrive in this new environment must be prepared to adapt swiftly and decisively. The broader cultural and ideological dimensions of this episode are equally compelling, as they reflect enduring debates about the nature of global interdependence and the limits of national sovereignty. The EU's decision to sever its pharmaceutical exports to the United States can be read as a bold declaration of self-determination, a refusal to be subsumed by policies that prioritize short-term gains over long-term stability. This move resonates deeply with a segment of the European public that values the protection of homegrown industries and the preservation of regulatory standards that have long been a hallmark of European economic policy. At the same time, it challenges entrenched narratives about the inevitable benefits of globalization, inviting a re-examination of the assumptions that have underpinned decades of economic integration. The ideological clash at the heart of this conflict is not merely a dispute over tariffs or trade balances, but a profound contest over the values that should guide economic policy in an increasingly interconnected world. It raises critical questions about the balance between national autonomy and global cooperation, about the role of government in protecting public welfare, and about the very nature of progress in an era defined by rapid technological and social change. In this sense, the shutdown of pharmaceutical exports is not simply a policy decision, it is a reflection of deep-seated tensions and aspirations that continue to shape the trajectory of international relations. This dramatic turn of events marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing evolution of global trade, where the intersection of economic policy, political strategy, and ideological conviction has produced an outcome that challenges conventional wisdom on multiple fronts. The decision to halt the flow of pharmaceuticals from Europe to the United States is a powerful reminder that in today's world, economic interdependence is no longer an unassailable given, but a dynamic and often fragile arrangement subject to the vicissitudes of political change. It underscores the reality that even the most vital sectors of the economy, sectors that have long been the bedrock of public health and scientific innovation, are vulnerable to the pressures of geopolitical maneuvering and domestic political imperatives. The ripple effects of this decision are likely to extend far beyond the immediate confines of the pharmaceutical industry, prompting a broader reassessment of trade policies, regulatory frameworks, and the strategic assumptions that underpin the global economic order. As policymakers, industry leaders, and citizens grapple with the implications of this bold move, the path forward remains fraught with uncertainty, yet imbued with the possibility of transformative change that could reshape the very foundations of international commerce. In the midst of this profound and complex scenario, both sides of the Atlantic are now faced with a stark choice: to continue on a path defined by unilateral assertions of national interest, or to seek new frameworks for cooperation that can accommodate the evolving realities of the global marketplace. The shutdown of pharmaceutical exports is emblematic of a broader trend toward recalibrating trade relations in an era marked by rapid political change and economic volatility. It serves as a wake-up call to policymakers who have long taken for granted the stability of long-standing economic alliances, urging them to reconsider the structural vulnerabilities that have been exposed by recent policy shifts. For the United States, the challenge now lies in devising strategies to secure alternative sources for critical pharmaceutical supplies while managing the domestic fallout from disrupted supply chains and increased market uncertainty. For the EU, the task is to ensure that its own industries can weather the storm of retaliatory measures and maintain the high standards that have become synonymous with European manufacturing. In both cases, the imperative is clear: a recalibration of economic strategies is needed, one that acknowledges the inherent risks of a fragmented global order and prioritizes resilience and adaptability in the face of unforeseen challenges. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the EU banning pharma exports? What consequences do you expect? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.